Good morning. This is Mark Skipper, MAS Office Cleaners, and I am here on AGC Talks Live. Looking forward to a fun program today. Oh, 1 second. Trying to get to the next slide here for everyone. There we go. Once again, in Mark Skipper, AGC. I am the team lead for this area. We have a great speaker for you today. AGC Talks is like a TED Talk where we have a speaker comes on for 15 minutes and will share some great thoughts that you will be able to take to your business or in your personal life. AGC was founded by Travis Sims, who started this organization with this great idea of networking, but a little different from what other organizations do. If you just play along with me for a moment, if down in the chat, if you will place what city, state, or country that you are viewing from, let us know whether you are watching live or if you are watching the replay. Now, you are probably watching from our AGC member Facebook location. If by chance you are not, we invite you to join through our public group Facebook page, where you'll have an opportunity to do some networking activities, pass referrals, and do things that are going to help to grow your business. Now, after today's program, which is, of course, live here on Facebook, you'll have an opportunity to watch the replay on Fire TV, Roku, Vimeo. Check us out on, or at least check out our founder, Travis Sims, on Mondays or any day of the week that you watch your podcasts. Now I'd like to share with you one of our sponsors today, which is Mailbox Power. It's about mailboxes and not inboxes. Building better relationships has never been easier. Using our platform, you can easily send a card and personalized gift to anyone with a simple tap or click, which is fully automated. Stop the digital overload and do anything that would mean so much more. Mailbox Power is the easiest way to wow people and the way for you to really get their attention. Develop stronger relationships, increase revenue, and improve your retention. You know you've reached an entirely new level when you inspire customer referrals and you don't have to constantly ask for them. For more information, contact Boyan at 320-249-1576 or go to betterappreciation.com. Now, in case you're asking, how can you become a sponsor of a upcoming AGC Live program? All you have to do is go to support@joinagc.com. You know, to be a member of AGC, it's only $1 a day. I would like to thank my other area leaders that are putting on programs just like this throughout the course of the month. Go to the website and you can check out and see when some of the upcoming programs are. Now it's that time for us to bring on today's speaker, and that's Diane Windingland. Diane Windingland, owner of Virtual Speech Coach, was originally trained as an engineer, but since 2011 has been speaking, coaching, and writing on communication skills and has published 11 books. Diane lives with her husband in Shoreview, Minnesota, and dedicates much of her spare time to Toastmasters International. Her talk for today is called Impromptu Speaking, Think on Your Feet. Please join me in welcoming Diane Windingland.
Thank you, Mark. It is a pleasure to be here. Imagine you are at a meeting or perhaps even a networking event, and someone asks you a question. Or perhaps you are invited to say a few words at an event, or perhaps you're fielding questions at an interview. Do you ever freeze up or ramble on? I was the type of person when I was a young engineer many, many years ago that I would ramble on. My boss would ask me a question, and I thought I was taking the logical approach in building up to my point, giving all the reasons and examples before I actually stated my point. I thought I was doing great until one day my boss said in frustration, "Would you just get to the point?" Point taken. Shortly after that, I joined Toastmasters, got to practice some impromptu speaking there, and took a couple of improv classes. Eventually, I even became a presentation coach. In the past couple of years, and I don't know if it has anything to do with the pandemic, I have had more and more people reach out to me about impromptu speaking skills where they feel like they're just at a loss for words. So today, I'm going to give you some impromptu speaking tips so that you can think on your feet without tripping over your tongue. Now, there are several situations that you might be using impromptu speaking skills, from meetings to Q&A sessions to job interviews and more. But sometime you may have an opportunity, you may be called to speak up and speak from the heart without a lot of preparation. Just like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did back in 1963 in front of the Lincoln Memorial. He had a prepared speech in front of him. And then he went off script and said, "I still have a dream." He set the notes aside. And then he did some impromptu speaking in the portion of the speech that became known to history as the "I have a dream" speech. Now, it wasn't that he'd never said those words. He had, and he was well acquainted with the concepts. But at that moment, he realized he had an opportunity. It was the perfect fusion of when preparedness and opportunity meet. And he was able to make a difference. Will you be ready to make a difference in yourself, in your life, in your job, in your world, when you are called to speak? Now, to make a difference and to sound like you haven't lost your mind when someone is asking you a question, you do have to prepare. Ideally, you will have anticipated the situation and you'll know three things. Now, there have been times I wish I would have anticipated the situation better. I can think back a couple of years when I was invited to speak at the Final Five speech competition for a local Christian high school. I'd actually worked with all of their seniors on their capstone speeches, and faculty had selected the top 5 to have a competition for cash prizes. They invited me to attend, and I enjoyed listening to the student speeches. And when the speeches were done, the principal was interviewing each student, and I started scrolling on my phone, checking the text messages, looking at Facebook. I wasn't really paying attention until I heard him say, "And now we would like our speech coach, Diane Windingland, to come up and give us some insight on today's speeches." What? I hadn't expected that. If only I had used one or more of these anticipation skills. One is horizon gazing, That's simply looking out over the horizon of time at what might come up that you might need to be able to speak at, and then to do a mental simulation, a little mental modeling of potential situations. If this happens, I will say that. And finally, to pay attention to clues. There are often clues with facial expression or body language that will indicate that you might be called upon. Unfortunately, I wasn't paying attention. I was looking at my phone. But these are some anticipation techniques that you can use so you are not caught off guard. Then you want to know three things. You want to know your audience, yourself, and your stuff. Fortunately, I did do pretty well on this. I knew my audience. I'd actually worked with all of the students and I knew many of the staff at the school. I knew myself. I knew I probably could rise to the occasion and say something and not sound too stupid. And finally, I knew my stuff. I had, fortunately, as each of the students were speaking, taken just a few notes on their speeches. So I did have something I could say. And as I was walking up, I remembered a Bible verse, which was very appropriate for a Christian school. And I started. The Bible says, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold. Today, we had many golden ideas from the speakers. And then I went on and just pointed out a few things I'd taken notes on. So if you can prepare by anticipation and knowing these three things, you will definitely do better. Additionally, there are strategies that you can use as you approach potential impromptu speaking situations to both buy time and to structure what you say in a framework so that you sound clear and confident. I'm very quickly going to mention 11 ways that you can buy time, and then I'll look a little closer at three of them. So one way is to pause for a breath. Then you can repeat or rephrase the question. You can clarify the question or even ask a question about the question. You can talk about the question. Oh, that was an interesting question. You can answer part of the question if you don't know the whole answer to everything. You can acknowledge and pivot, but be careful on this one. If you do it too much, people will think you are slippery like a politician. You can repeat your own or someone else's words. You can review. You can take a step back and summarize some of the things that have been said up to that point. You can, once in a while, ask for more time to think about it or to get more information. You can always take a sip of water. And once in a while, you can even turn it over to someone else who might be better qualified to give an answer. Looking at three of the specific techniques, pausing for a breath. This is a great way to not only buy yourself some time, but a 3 to 5 second pause where you take a breath can reduce your anxiety and make you look more deliberate and confident as well. So take a breath. You can repeat or rephrase the question using similar words or repeating it exactly. You can clarify the question, and this really is two ideas. The first idea is where it's kind of like repeating the question, but then you give it in a different way to show that you have understood the question and that the person asking you the question understands your interpretation. And on this slide, you might see several ways that you might lead into clarifying the question, such as, so what you're asking is, or from what I understand, you want to know. Phrases like this also buy you a little extra time. But clarifying the question can also mean that you ask a question about the question if there's something you're not sure what direction you should go. Now, you can combine these techniques too. You can take a breath, repeat or rephrase the question, and then ask a question about the question. I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm asked, if you could speak to anyone, who would that be and why? Take a breath. Repeat the question. If I could speak to anyone, who would that be and why? And then ask a question about the question. Can it be someone who is not currently alive, someone from history? Could it be someone fictional? So you could ask a few questions to define the area that you're going to answer. And I would say probably the easiest thing to do is take a breath and repeat the question. That'll almost always buy you a little time. And also, sometimes people ask really confusing questions because I think they don't even know what they're completely asking for. So by repeating it, you also clarify it for the person who is asking the question. Then, before I do that, I wanted to point out, of course, you can combine many more than just the three I mentioned. And there will be a resource at the end where you can get an infographic that shows several ways that you can buy time, as well as several impromptu frameworks. I'm only going to mention one impromptu framework today. It's my go-to impromptu framework, and that is PREP. PREP is an acronym that I first read about in a book called Speaking Up: Surviving Executive Presentations. And the reason PREP is so useful is the fact that you get to the point right away. The acronym PREP stands for point, reason, example, point. State your point, give a reason, give an example, and then restate your point. If you're talking with executives or people who are busy, they don't have time for you to build up to your point. They're wondering, what's the point? So get to the point right away. I'll give you an example of PREP in a non-business situation. Let's say you and I were talking about vacation ideas. I might say, I suggest you consider taking a cruise for one of your next vacations. That was the point. The reason, because cruises are so very convenient. For example, a few years ago, before COVID, my husband and I went on a 22-day, 18-port Mediterranean cruise. We didn't have to make hotel accommodations at all those places. We didn't have to worry about how we were going to get from place to place. We didn't have to lug our luggage around and repack and unpack. It was all so convenient right there on the cruise. If you want to see a lot of places and you want to have a relaxing, convenient time, I suggest you consider taking a cruise. Now, one of the other beauties of this particular approach is if you happen to meander, that never happens, right? Where you start with a point and then you somehow meander in the middle. If you come back to your point at the end, you still nail it home. And people like, oh yeah, that's the point. So it gives you a starting and an ending point that makes sure your point gets across. Now, none of these strategies matter at all if you're not present. Just like I was on my phone. I think our phones are probably one of the biggest things to tear us away from being present. Also, if you're on virtual meetings, you can be guaranteed that people are going to be distracted, right? It's way too easy to be distracted. But when you're distracted, your mind isn't focused on what's happening in front of you. And you might be taken by surprise when you're asked to contribute at a meeting. One tip I have for you to help you focus and be present when you're in a meeting especially is to take notes. You don't have to take extensive notes. You just need to jot down a few pertinent points. That way, if you're asked to contribute, you can even use some of the same keywords that have been said before. You can refer back, you can summarize and then move on. You will look like you're really paying attention. If you deal with clients, this is also key, that you're present, but take a few notes, because when you can repeat back to the client the same words that they used with you, they really feel like you have heard them and understand them. So be present. Use these tips to prepare, to anticipate, to know three things, to buy time, take a breath, repeat or rephrase the question, and then use frameworks. We only talked about one today, prep. There are others, but even just get started with prep. Practice it at home. Practice it at the dinner table with your family. You can make a fun time out of asking each other questions and then practicing using this approach. And finally, be present. Be all there when you're in a conversation or you're in a meeting, so that you are ready when the opportunity arises. Be ready to make a difference. Be ready to sound clear and confident when you speak off the top of your head. You don't have to sound like you're tripping over your tongue. Now, here's some free stuff. If you want to point your phone at that QR code, it will take you to a web page, or you can just write down the short URL. It will take you to a web page that includes a infographic that has ways to buy time, as well as a brief explanation of different kinds of frameworks. It also will include an opportunity to meet with me for a consultation. Maybe you want to practice an interview skill, and a few other resources as well. Think on your feet. Don't trip on your tongue. Thank you, Mark.
All right. Diane, that was a fantastic presentation. I wish that I had known a number of these things at the very beginning of my career. I shouldn't just say at the beginning, throughout my career. Were you always comfortable standing up and speaking in front of people?
Oh, no. In fact, you and I both have the experience of Toastmasters, Mark. I still remember when I went to my first Toastmasters meeting where people practice speaking and leadership skills, and it was time for the impromptu speaking portion of the club meeting, which they call table topics. And I stood up to answer the question. I don't remember what the question was. And I spoke for a total of 15 seconds. I just could not wait to be done. And I remember the feeling, and maybe you felt this perhaps even in a networking event where they go around and everybody has 30 seconds to a minute to talk about their business. I remember feeling dread as it would get closer and closer to my turn. And part of that problem was that I felt I had to memorize what I was going to say. And, I even practiced the elevator speech, which I honestly don't like. I think it's much easier to have what I call a bumper sticker statement, where it's just like one sentence. And then if you're in a conversation, you can go back and forth. So my sentence might be, I coach and train subject matter experts to speak with confidence and clarity. And that's just like one sentence. And then if people are interested, I might ask someone what they do, or they might ask, well, how do you do that? But to not memorize things, and not that you shouldn't practice for flow, but if you try to say things word for word, you're just going to trip over your tongue.
Excellent advice. And I like that, bumper sticker as opposed to elevator speech.
Right. Yes.
That is great. I wish, at least in my school, we didn't have parts or classes that talked about, one, how to speak, and two, how to do impromptu speaking. I just think that would be such a value if we incorporated that throughout our education, having speaking opportunities for students. A lot of what
Certainly.
you talked about, one word that at least for me stuck out a lot was preparation, preparation, preparation. Could you talk a little bit more about preparation?
Well, a lot of people think that impromptu speaking is speaking without any preparation. And sometimes that does happen. Where when that happens, if you have a go-to framework like prep, you can always think, oh, what's my main point? But in many situations, it's not a complete surprise that you might be asked to say something. If you're at a networking meeting, I don't know, like there was BNI, I was in BNI a few years ago, you're going to probably say something. So you can think about, so who's my audience? What do they know? And what is important to them? So, because a lot of people can talk about things that don't really intersect with other
Mhm.
people's level of knowledge or their level of interest. So know your audience. What do they know? What's important to them as regarding what you might talk about? Being able to anticipate. If you're going in for a job interview, I mean, this is like the most obvious thing. You're not going to go in cold. You're going
Mhm.
to practice some interview questions like, what are your greatest strengths? What are your greatest weaknesses? Tell me about yourself. I mean, there's standard things that you can practice. You'll look up information on the company. So that's an obvious situation to prepare for. And one of the things, if you are called a lot to speak on an impromptu basis, you may want to think about what values you hold strongly and where you learned them from, and have a few go-to stories or examples about a value you hold strongly that could apply in different situations.
So being able to anticipate different types of questions,
Right,
things that
right.
people want to. Another thing that you talked about that I think is very valuable is buying yourself time, pausing. And I really believe that pausing is probably one of the most powerful things that you can use when you speak for a variety of different reasons. Could you talk a little bit about the power of pausing? What does that do in helping you as a speaker?
Well, I would say it's not just about speaking, it's even about executive presence. If you look at higher level executives, typically they speak a little more slowly than other people. They are not in a rush to get their point across. They may take a breath and pause for a few seconds, not only to gather their thoughts, but to get you focused on them because you are anticipating they're going to say something. And by taking that pause, it allows people to focus in on you. It can even calm the environment. Now, if you are in the middle of saying something and you've said something very significant, that's a good time to pause and let it sink in a little bit as well.
I always call that let it marinate.
Yes.
Yep, yep. Pausing is once again, I think, very, very powerful. Are there any last tips that you would like to share with the audience? I think a lot of people, when it comes to impromptu speaking, being in staff meetings, being knowing the right way to share your thoughts and ideas, I think that this is going to be a really powerful video for our members. So, are there any last tips you would like to share before we go?
Well, I will share one more impromptu framework that I think is one that a lot of leaders use in order to get buy into a vision. And I call that the past, present, future vision format, where let's say you want people to buy into a vision for the future. And you can start out with talking about the shared past and then move into the shared present and then talk about the shared envisioned future. that they all need to work together toward to make it happen. So past, present, future, to share a vision is a great way to engage people and buy into an idea.
Diane, thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge and experience. If someone would like to get a hold of you to talk more about impromptu speaking, once again, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, probably the easiest thing to do is to go to my website, which is virtualspeechcoach.com. And you can contact me through that. Or if you had the free stuff web page, that's part of my website as well.
All right. Well, Diane, you have a fantastic week, and we'll work on not tripping over our tongue.
Great.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Mark.
All right. What a wonderful topic. I don't know about you, but up until college, I was petrified to stand up and give presentations, to speak at staff meetings, even once I got my first job. So these tips I find to be very helpful, and I hope that you found those to be helpful as well. Well, I'm going to lead us out of here, so just hold on one second. Let's see if I can hit the right slides here. And all right, we're almost out of here. So once again, we'll be having AGC talks throughout the course of the month. And you can see the various states that we will be making our presentations from. We want to thank our global sponsor, our premier sponsor, Global IT. If you are looking for a community of other professionals that you can learn with, do business with, AGC is the organization that can provide that for you. Just a cost of only $1 a day. So with that, you have a fantastic week.